I was happy to see your piece in Salon. So let's do an official introduction to everyone. And thanks again for coming on. This is so great. So the federal government is responsible for countless deaths, not only for their failure to prepare for the coronavirus outbreak in the US, but also for the total mismanagement of it happening now. Our guest is Salon's Igor Derysh, who reports that 2 House committees have called on the Federal Emergency Management Agency to turn over documents about the agency's seizing orders of coronavirus medical supplies overseen by Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. Igor, thanks for joining us on the program.
Thanks for having me.
So can you talk about, how is it possible that the richest nation in the world, we could be so sorely lacking in the healthcare materials that we need?
Yeah, I mean, there was warnings going on for years, both inside the White House and externally. And it's not just Trump. I mean, it seems like every administration sort of assumed that a pandemic wouldn't happen on their watch. And then when it did, I mean, it caught everybody blindsided.
Well, we know that we could have been preparing for this problem long before the crisis hit, and we certainly weren't. But your reporting indicates that even now we're grossly mismanaging it. Can you describe what you're seeing from the federal government?
Yeah, so I mean, Trump basically tried to abdicate the responsibility for directing supplies to the states, but almost immediately after that, he put FEMA in charge of coordinating the response. And what happened is states started bidding against each other, and then were bidding against FEMA, and it drove up the prices. So one of the things that Jared introduced, he has a shadow task force that he's running. It's filled with these tech entrepreneur types. They were sort of put in charge of the supply chain, and they brushed up against FEMA officials, career officials. They pretty resentful comments that officials made to the New York Times and Washington Post about this. And now FEMA is also basically hijacking supplies that the states are able to order. So Jared Polis, who's the governor in Colorado, he said that FEMA confiscated 500 ventilators that the state had bought. Charlie Baker, he's the Republican governor in Massachusetts. He said that FEMA confiscated 3 million masks that they had ordered from China. So governors like J.B. Pritzker in Illinois have now started hiding their shipments to avoid being detected by FEMA. There was a doctor who published a letter in the New England Journal of Medicine describing how he had to literally smuggle supplies in trucks that were intended to look like food delivery trucks. They had to take different routes to the hospital. And even then, after all that, he had to contact his representative to make sure that they weren't absconded with.
I believe Donald Trump said something about how, those supplies that FEMA is stealing and hoarding are just being redistributing to states who have a bigger need. Is there any evidence that that's valid? And do we know what FEMA's doing with the supplies?
So it's hard to say. That's really the main problem here is there's no oversight. Congress has gone home. Trump is firing inspector generals. There's really nobody minding the store. So yeah, we've seen that Jared has sent like New York some supplies when he's gotten calls from friends. He said as much in that news conference where he called it our stockpile that's not for the states.
I don't. So you have to know somebody in order to get an N95.
It seems that way. There hasn't been any report. There was actually a great report in ProPublica today about how there really isn't any evidence that Jared has helped any state outside of New Jersey, New York, when people who know him have called up either him or the president.
What is his shadow task force doing? If it's FEMA that's going out and stealing the supplies for some unknown reason, and then Jared has his own shadow task force made up of, I don't know, the tech people. What are the shadow people doing?
Well, that's what the Oversight Committee, the Homeland Security Committee, and more recently other committees, including the Senate, have tried to find out is exactly what Jared is doing. He functions in this sort of opaque way, this shadowy way inside the White House, not just on this, in terms of everything. So you really haven't seen a whole lot of oversight with Kushner really for the whole 3+ years of the Trump presidency, even though he's arguably the second most powerful man in the White House.
I don't even know what to say, Igor. It's just so, I guess, unusual, shall we say. And we played a piece from Now This Politics about Jared Kushner's, rise to the position that he's unearned rise to the position that he's in. Are there people investigating where the FEMA supplies are going to?
So not really. I mean, the Government Accountability Office is planning to at least do some oversight of the $2.2 trillion relief bill that they passed. But there's inspectors generals, the ones that Trump has kept, but they're not really, don't seem to be pursuing it. So Congress is at home right now. They're sending letters to FEMA, to Administrator Peter Gaynor, asking for documents. We know that the Trump administration is rarely keen to hand over documents. They're very prone to stonewalling. But what makes it even more difficult is that they're stuck at home. They're holding Zoom teleconferences. They're not on the Capitol. They can't force the Trump administration to pretty much do anything, but they can haul in a lot of these manufacturers and distributors.
So if a whistleblower happened to be watching this stream, I would suggest you go to Twitter and get Igor Derysh on Twitter and let him know if you happen to know where the stuff is going. Maybe you're working for FEMA or you have a cousin who works for FEMA. That might be the only way to get this information out.
Yeah, it's not just FEMA. The doctor I mentioned, he said that the FBI got involved because they're also policing imports to make sure they're not being resold on the black market. So even after he was able to smuggle these KN95 masks from China, he then had to get stopped by the FBI and explain, no, I'm taking these to a hospital that's desperately in need of them.
Wow. This is absolutely infuriating. The fact that, everyone's clapping at 7:00 p.m. here in New York City for the hospital workers. And yet when the state level officials or hospitals themselves try to procure materials, that they're coming in and being stolen by FEMA. What do we do, Igor? I don't know.
Well, Congress is going to have to come back. I mean, Congress can't just keep abdicating this oversight responsibility because there's a government that's still functioning. Trump is basically alone minding the store, and there's nobody looking over.
Yeah. What can people do that are following this story who are, let's say, concerned about this issue?
I think you should urge your representative to return to Washington, because I think while Trump is holding 2-hour news briefings every day, bringing in all these CEOs and executives to the White House, trotting out in front of the camera, we're not really seeing basically any Democrats on this.
It does seem like Trump is the one saying, "Hey, where's the Congress? They need to get back here." But also, Democrats really need the Congress to come back.
You would think this would be an important issue in the presidential race, and yet Joe Biden is hunkered down in his Delaware bunkers. So Trump is basically all alone in Washington doing what he wants right now.
Oh, that's terrifying. Okay, Igor, what's the next story you're working on?
We're working on several things. One of the things that I was recently covering is that hospitals are laying off thousands of workers despite them being, fill up with coronavirus patients. A lot of that has been the result of hospitals having to end elective surgery.
But haven't they had to pull sort of staff from other areas into
in some cases, yes. There's New York, for example, has had a lot of federal help. There's been thousands of people that were brought in to help at hospitals, but a lot of hospitals, basically in every state right now, make about 40 to 60% of all their money off of elective surgeries. So many of these hospitals have just had to cut back just because they don't have the money to keep the staff on hand.
So a question coming in from our stream chat, and this seems to be a question that they're asking everyone. It's a little on the personal level. What are you doing, Igor, yourself as a journalist to hold on to hope in these trying times?
I don't know how much hope I'm holding on to.
You're just doing your job.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's tough. Again, not just Congress. A lot of journalists are stuck at home too, so it's really hard to get out there and pound the pavement or make calls when people are not at work.
Are you in New York still?
Yeah.
No. So, and your family is surviving the COVID
Yeah, we're all
crisis?
hunkered down. I don't even know what's going on in the outside world.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And my job is the news. So I bring in people who know specifically things that are specific, and we try to chunk it all together so that we
Yeah,
can.
like I know what's going on in Washington, but I have no idea what's going on like my block.
Yeah, nothing. It's what neighborhood are you in, if you don't mind?
I'm in Midwood, so it's actually has one of
Oh,
the
right near
highest
Brooklyn College.
rates. Yeah, it has one of the highest rates of coronavirus infections right now.
Yeah, so I wouldn't go out there. It's not
Nope.
important. And how are you getting food? I'm so
I
Italian. That's
have
my
been.
main concern. Are you eating? Are you okay? You have food?
I have had to venture out into some of the smaller stores because the bigger ones are all just like sold out of a lot of stuff, but the smaller ones seem okay. I tried to order food online, but like there's no deliveries and there's
There's
no
no delivery.
food.
No, there's no deliveries and no food. You have to risk it now these days. I know. Well, Igor, thanks for joining us. Now that you've been on once, we're going to want you to come back on the regular. And thank you for the work that you're doing to expose the corruption that's going on in our government. It was really exciting for me to see your name pop up on my friend's Facebook feed as I was scrolling through. So I'm really excited for what you're up to.
Yeah, it was great to chat with you. Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, I hope you'll come back soon. My a producer will reach out to you, and good luck out there in Midwood.
Absolutely. You
I'm in
too.
Brooklyn too. I'm not that far, but
Yeah. Stay safe.
so yeah, stay safe.